Welcome back to the MTN.fire Podcast. This episode kicks off what I'm calling When the Fire Doesn't Make Sense. This isn't just a Bible study, it's a walk through the fire. We're going to talk about what it means to stay faithful when you didn't do anything wrong, when you did everything right, and still got burned. Job was blameless, and he burned. And maybe so have you. Now, before we dive in, I just want to say something real. It's been a minute. 82 days to be exact. Not because the fire went out, but because life hit hard. And I truly mean hard. I've been fighting through computer issues, job hunting, vehicle woes, and all the stuff that tries to stop you when you're trying to be obedient. I appreciate you all hanging in there with me, praying and being patient. I cannot thank you enough. I've missed this. I've missed showing up for you. I've missed telling these stories, speaking truth, and walking through these flames together. So if you've been waiting on the next episode, I see you, and I'm right there with you. Let's get back to it. This one hits close for me because some of my deepest wounds came before I even understood what pain was. Let's get into this. When the blameless burn. We're going to start off in Job chapter 1, and we're really going to focus first on the first 12 verses. Now, Job was upright. He honored God, and he walked with integrity. He was blessed, family, fortune, favor, and a hedge of protection around his life. But Satan didn't bring Job to God. God brought Job to Satan. Have you considered my servant Job? What do you do when you didn't invite the fire? God did. What happens when that hedge breaks? And it's not because of sin, but because of trust. Sometimes the testing doesn't come because you failed. It comes because God trusts you with the weight. This isn't the kind of story that fits neatly into Instagram quotes. This is the kind that leaves you begging for your next breath and choosing whether you'll still say, "Blessed be the name of the Lord." Job wasn't just a wealthy man. He was a man of integrity, called blameless and upright. A man who feared God and turned away from evil. He lived in the land of Uz, and he was the greatest of all the people of the East. He had 7 sons, 3 daughters, thousands of livestock, and a huge household. But beyond material wealth, Job was deeply spiritual. Every time his children would feast, Job would rise early the next morning and offer burnt sacrifices, just in case they'd sinned. He was a spiritual covering over his family, interceding even when he didn't know if anything was wrong. That's the kind of faithfulness that made him not just a father, but a priest over his home. Job wasn't soft, he was sturdy, quiet, reverent, but bold enough that God himself pointed him out to Satan. That's how strong Job's integrity was. God brought up his name in heaven's courtroom. Let that settle in. This wasn't a punishment. It was a setup. This next part of the chapter always hits me in the gut. From verses 13 through 19. One servant comes, then another, then another. Fire, wind, raiders, death. His livestock, gone. His workers, dead. His sons and daughters, lost in one collapse. It didn't come gradually. It hit like lightning. He didn't even get to grieve one loss before the next one hit. And I get that, because I was born into loss. Adoption was both my redemption and my wound. Before I could talk, I was separated. Before I could understand love, I had already tasted what it was like to be left. But it didn't stop there. In more recent years, it's felt like wave after wave. I've walked through job loss more than once. I've had doors slammed shut that I was sure God had opened. I've stared at a wall of bills, wondering how I was going to feed my kids. I've poured my heart into people just to have it broken. Loved hard and lost hard. And then there's the battle no one sees. The mental health war behind the smile. Sleepless nights, panic attacks. That quiet voice that whispers, "You're not enough." I've sat in the ashes just like Job. Not because I failed, but because the fire found me anyway. There wasn't some sin that brought that into my life. There wasn't some moral failure in a baby crib. There wasn't some curse that made the storm come. It wasn't all sin. Some of it was sovereignty. And Job responds the only way a man can when his world shatters. Then Job arose and tore his robe and shaved his head and fell on the ground and worshipped. Job didn't just lose stuff. He lost legacy. He lost his name through his children. That was everything to a man like Job. Your name, your line, your honor, your legacy. This wasn't just about grief. It was about identity. About watching the thing you built collapse in front of you. And it wasn't a slow erosion. It was obliteration. It's one thing to lose what you love. It's another to lose who you thought you were. And some of you know what that feels like. One minute you're a dad, a husband, a provider, a servant of God. And the next, you're sitting in the ruins of who you used to be, wondering if any of it mattered. But here's what Job did that shook heaven and hell. He worshiped. He didn't worship because he understood. He didn't worship because it was easy. He worshiped because God was still worthy, even when the blessings were gone. Moving into chapter 2, the first 10 verses. When the enemy asks for more. You'd think the story might ease up here, like maybe Job passed the test, maybe now the reward comes. But no, the enemy comes back. And God says he still holds fast his integrity. So the enemy asks for more. Skin for skin, a man will give everything for his life. God allows it. And this time, the target isn't his wealth. It's not his family. It's not his legacy. It's his body. Painful sores from the soles of his feet to the top of his head. He scrapes himself with broken pottery, sitting in ashes. Broken body, broken heart, still breathing. And then, the voice that's supposed to be closest to him says, "Curse God and die." Now, here's where it gets wild. The Hebrew word translated as curse is actually barak, which usually means bless. She might not have been telling him to curse God like we think. She may have been saying, "Bless him again, Job. See if that gets you anything but death this time." Sarcasm, bitterness, exhaustion. She's hurting too, but she doesn't know how to carry it. And Job's reply, "Shall we receive good from God? And shall we not receive evil?" He refused to break. He refused to let his pain rewrite his praise. Now, here's the fire truth. The enemy wants to isolate you in your pain. The people around you might not understand what God is doing, but don't let that confusion pull you out of your calling. Now, let's be real. Spiritual tests feel one way, but when it hits your body, when it hits your health, that's a whole different kind of fire. Job wasn't hurting emotionally anymore. He was physically breaking down. No relief, no sleep, no escape. You ever been in that kind of pain where your skin just feels heavy? Where you're just being alive feels like punishment? That's where Job was. And in the middle of all that, the enemy's goal wasn't just suffering, it was surrender. He wanted Job to tap out. He wanted him to say, God, you're not worth this. And then his wife shows up. Not with comfort, not with oil for his wounds or hope for his soul, but with a question wrapped in bitterness. Just curse him, get it all over with. Now, listen, before we judge her too hard, she lost everything too. Her babies, her home, her security. She was grieving. But grief can either turn you bitter or broken. And broken is where worship happens. Job was broken, but he chose to stay faithful. He didn't defend his pain. He didn't clap back with theology. He just laid down this truth. Shall we receive good from God and not also the bad? It wasn't theology. It was trust. And this part right here, in all this, Job did not sin with his lips. That's the kind of fireproof faith I want. Not the kind that prays when it's easy. The kind that bleeds and still believes. Job's story isn't a punishment story. It's a purpose story. God wasn't trying to destroy Job. He was setting the stage for something greater. Revelation, encounter, testimony. Sometimes the pain that you've carried wasn't a sentence, it was a setup. I used to think I was defective because I was given up. I used to believe I was a mistake. Maybe God forgot me. But I know now, He was planting me. Before the blessing came the breaking. Before the fire came the foundation. And maybe, just maybe, your fire is doing the same. And for those of you who have stared down that dark moment, who have said like Job, let the day perish on which I was born, let me tell you something. Job wished he could rouse Leviathan, the creature of ancient chaos, so that the day of his birth could be undone. But Leviathan didn't win. The chaos didn't consume him. If you're listening to this, you're still here, still breathing, still fighting. There may have been a moment when death seemed like peace, but the fact that you made it to today means there's purpose ahead. Your story is not done. You know, a lot of people read Job and see punishment, but they miss the first verse. There was a man, blameless and upright. This wasn't discipline. This wasn't correction. This was a setup. Not a setup for failure, a setup for glory. What if the fire you're in isn't proof that God's mad at you, but that He's invested in you? God trusted Job with the weight of testimony, and that's not something He gives lightly. You know, for years I thought pain meant I'd been disqualified. If something went wrong, I assumed it was my fault. Bad day, must be sin. Silent season, must have messed up. Suffering, that's punishment. But Job taught me something different. Sometimes God lets you walk through the fire, not because you're weak, but because you're ready. Ready to reveal something deeper, ready to carry something heavier, ready to shine in a way that only happens when everything else gets burned away. Now, back to that Leviathan thing. Job didn't just weep, he wailed. In chapter 3, he cursed the day of his birth. And in the middle of that breakdown, he cried out for Leviathan. Let it rouse up and swallow the day I was born. That wasn't poetry, that was desperation. He was saying, if this is what life is, I don't want it. He wanted the chaos dragon of ancient myth to unmake him, to rewind his story, to end the pain. But listen, Leviathan didn't come. Chaos didn't win. Darkness didn't swallow the light. Because no matter how loud the enemy roars, God still holds the pen. And the next chapter of Job's life would be double what he lost. Not because he earned it, but because he endured it. If you're still here, it means your pain wasn't the end. It was the setup. And if God trusted you with that kind of weight, He's also prepared the glory on the other side. If you feel like Job right now, burned without cause, stripped without explanation, you're not alone. And you're not disqualified. If you're in it and you're still breathing, God's not done. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Let that be your war cry. Let that be your anthem in those ashes. You don't need the answers to hold the fire. You just need the faith to keep walking through it. In the next episode, the friends show up. And sometimes they bring salt instead of healing. We're going to talk about what not to say to someone who's suffering and how well-meaning people can still miss the mark. Until then, stay faithful, stay burning. This is Mountain Fire, and you're not alone in the flames.